Share with you from I want to talk this morning about the mind. I know that I've shared about the mind in the past, but I want to focus this morning again about the mind. And my text is taken from Philippians chapter 4, and we'll be reading verses 6 through to 8. That Philippians chapter 4, reading verses 6 through to 8. Be careful for nothing. And I want to start from, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. And my thought for this morning is, take control of your mind, or take control of your thought life. There are two facets I want to explore this morning. And the one, I want to look at, why do we need to control our minds? Why do we need to control our minds? And secondly, how can we control our minds? So those two things I will be exploring this morning. Now, when we refer to the mind, or when we talk about the mind, what exactly are we talking about? What exactly is the mind? Now, there's a Greek word for mind, and it's called nous. And that has been interpreted to mean the inward self. So when we talk about the mind, we are talking about the inward self. And just to unpack that a little bit, the mind, or the inward self, it is that God-given ability within every person. And it is with that God-given ability you think, you reflect, and you reason within yourself. So God has given us the ability to reason and to make intellectual decisions. And the New Testament speaks quite frequently about the mind, but one prominent text was in Romans chapter 12, verses 2 to 3, when it talks about being transformed by the renewing of the mind. The human mind is very powerful. As I've said, it is a place where decisions are made. It is the area where our thoughts are formulated and where actions are determined. Why do we need to control our minds? The mind, we are bombarded every day by a variety of things. We face pressure, and it seems as if there is an assault on the human mind. People want to control the mind. The media want to control the mind. And so things that comes out in the media, the whole idea is to capture your mind, and once your mind is captured, then they get you. We are pressured today. There's so many ends that we want to meet. We notice that politicians, they use the media to capture our minds. When I talk about the media, I'm talking about the internet, I'm talking about television, I'm talking about radio, I'm talking about our mobile phones that we use, newspaper, any form of communication that reach out to people. They use that because they want your mind. They want to control your mind. Because once the mind is controlled, then they got the human being. There's so many pressure today. Pressure at work, pressure in your home, pressure in relationships, pressure to make decisions, so many pressures, so many obligations that we have. And the mind, sometimes you might be sitting down and your mind is traveling at 100 miles an hour. Sometimes people go to sleep and they can't sleep because the mind is still working. The mind is still going through bits and pieces, traveling, sorting out this and that. Even the devil wants to control our minds. As I've said before, if your mind is controlled, your body is controlled. Your pocketbook will be controlled if somebody controls your mind. Your daily activities will be controlled. The food you eat will be controlled. The clothes you wear will be controlled. The places you go to and the things you do and do not do all depends on decisions that are made within the mind. Reasons why we need to get a control of our minds. How can we control our minds? What does the Bible have to say about the how we control our minds? Verse 6 tells us in Philippians chapter 4. He said, but in everything, not some things. You see, sometimes we only bring some things to the Lord. I need to sort this out for myself. I need to get this right. But Lord, when it comes to spiritual thing or this thing, Lord, I will tell you about this. But this is mine. Don't touch this territory, Lord. This area within my life is mine. It is controlled. It is under lock and key. Don't touch that part. I am not going to tell God about this. But the Bible says, but in everything, not some things. So if our minds, if we do not bring everything to God, our minds are going to be caught up in those issues, trying to sort out these issues. And I can tell you now, some things you can't sort it. There's something you will never be able to unravel it, because the more you're trying to sort it, is the more you're tied up in knots and bits, is the more confused you get. So Paul captures this in this passage that he wrote to the Philippians. Paul said, but in everything, not some things, by prayer and supplication. We're saying that we need to go to God in prayer. Bring everything. In fact, there's a songwriter that says, take it to the Lord in prayer. Bring everything to the Lord in prayer. And sometimes we say that verbally, we verbalize that. But when we reach the point where we are in the situation, we fail to bring things to God in prayer. Paul is saying, in order for us to control our minds, we need to bring everything to God in prayer, with prayer and supplication. Not just verbalizing some words, but really communicating with God, to God, with that situation. And you'll get to know me. As you get to know me, you'll understand. I love the word thanksgiving. Giving God thanks. I love it. Paul was here saying, not only by prayer and supplication, but do that with thanksgiving. Can we thank God when things are going wrong? Can we thank God when we are going through difficulties? Can we thank God when our circumstances seem to surmount us? Paul is saying, everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. And I really believe that sometimes we don't thank God enough. I believe that we need to have a spirit of thanksgiving, a spirit of gratitude, even though we might not be verbalizing it all the time, but within our hearts, we should have that spirit where we are thankful to God. Many times our focus is on the negatives. Our focus is on the difficulties. And we fail to see the blessings of God within our lives. And we fail to give God thanks for His goodness. Paul was saying, if you are going to control your mind, if you're going to get your mind in the right sphere, you need to bring everything to Him. Everything in prayer, everything in supplication, and water that. Drizzle thanksgiving. Pour thanksgiving over everything, all the prayers that you prayed. Make your requests be known to God. He knows it, but God expects us to tell him about it. And look what happened. Look what it says here. When you do that, the Bible tells us, and the peace of God. You see, before we can experience the peace of God, we need to bring our supplication to him. We need to talk to him. We need to present our needs and our circumstances with him, and do that in the attitude and the atmosphere of praise and thanksgiving. The Bible says, when we do that, and the peace of God which passeth all understanding shall keep your hearts and mind through Jesus Christ. So we'll first do that by bringing all our cares to God. The first way to do it. And secondly, by allowing God's peace to guard your heart and mind. It's almost like there's a chain reaction. And if you don't do certain things, it cannot allow other things to come in place. If we don't present our supplication, our needs to God in prayer and with thanksgiving, it prevents the peace of God to come within our hearts. By bringing our cares to God without worrying. Don't worry about it. Bring them to God. Don't worry about it. But bring them to God. I always say to people, what you can't change, don't worry about it. Don't stress yourself about it. Because when you stress yourself about it, you're not going to change it. It don't do nothing. In fact, it make it worse. Because all you're happening to yourself, you're stressing yourself out, you're giving yourself illness, high blood pressure, and you name it. Stressing yourself out. And worrying change nothing. Nothing. So leave it. Don't worry about it. Don't stress. Do what you can and just leave it. But when you present it to God, my friend, and leave it alone, the Bible says the peace of God. And Paul went to the extent of telling us more about the peace of God. The peace of God passes all, not some understanding, all understanding. And what it is actually saying to me is that whatever the issues may be, God understands. God knows. If we have 1,000 issues in this place this morning, every single one of them God knows about it. And every single one of them God has an answer for. Every single one God has a solution for. So Paul is saying, bring them to the Master. Bring them to the King of Kings. Bring them to the all-wise God without worrying and stressing yourself about it. And the peace of God will come over you. The peace of God will surmount your life. God's peace will help you to manage the circumstances around you. You can go to bed and sleep. You see, sometimes our happiness and our joy are dependent on our external circumstances. There's some people who can only shout for joy and be happy when everything is going glorious. Everything is brilliant. But the moment that they go through some trials, they wither up. They wither up. But when we present things to God, when the peace of God dwells within our heart, our circumstances does not determine our joy. Our joy comes from inside of us. Even when there's going to be turmoil outside. You remember Jesus while he was on the lake of Gennesaret, the lake. He was asleep where there was a storm around him. The disciples, they were terrified. They were petrified. We're going to die. We're going to drown. And Jesus was relaxing, asleep. The peace of God. You can experience that peace and serenity within your heart when there are turmoil around you. Because you have presented it to God. You have brought it to God. You thank God for your circumstances. And I cannot forget Paul and Silas in prison. I kept talking about it over and over. They were in stocks. They were in a dungeon. It was cold and it was murky. It was dark. It was cold. Their feet were in stock. Right environment to complain. Right environment to blame God. God, look what I'm doing for you. Paul could have said, Lord, I've planted so many churches. I've planted so many churches. Thousands and thousands of people have come to know you through me. Why have you caused this to happen to me? Why this? Why God is allowing this within my life? There are people there are churches that I have to visit. There are churches in Ephesus and Thyatira and Sardis that need to be sorted out. There are people who are writing to me, who are inviting me to church, who are inviting me to sort out the issues within their church. Here am I in prison, Lord. You need to get me out. Why are you allowing this to happen to me? Paul did not do that. In fact, Paul sang praises to God. He sang praises to God. The Bible says chains fell off, prison door break down, and angels came to deliver. I believe, my friend, some of us, our deliverance will come through praises. Our deliverance will come through thanksgiving. Our deliverance will come through not looking at our circumstances around us, but looking on God who we serve, the great I am, the all-powerful, creative God who can deliver us from all circumstances. The peace of God which passeth all understanding. That peace will enable us to relax and to be calm in difficulties. I tell you that at school, I tell you, they say, how is it you're so laid back? How is it that you're so calm? Because the peace of God is with me. It is a peace that will keep us sane when we encounter difficulties. Because I can tell you, there are some difficulties that you will go through. There are some trying circumstances that you're going through. And you could be sitting here right now going through some of those issues. But God's peace will give you contentment and joy. When others around you are failing, when things around you are falling apart, God's peace can give you that joy. It is a peace that will surprise others who don't have it. How is it that this person is so calm? How is it that you're going through this and you're so relaxed? Because it's a peace that comes from within. It is a peace that is connected to the source, Jesus, the Prince of Peace. We can overcome, control our minds by bringing all our cares to Christ without worrying, and by allowing God's peace to guard our hearts and our minds. Look with me in verse 8. Finally, my brother, after all this, my brethren, Paul then tells us what we need to think about. And I'm talking here about the power of the mind. And I believe that sometimes we are the cause of our own downfall. We are the cause of our own stress. We are the cause of our own worrying. We are the cause of our own failures. Paul said, whatsoever things are true. He's telling us how to think, what to think about. Our minds sometimes are on the wrong things. Our focus are on the wrong things. We feed and feast on the wrong things within our minds. And it causes us to be dejected. It causes us to be frustrated. It causes us to be down. It prevents us from sleeping. It prevents us from eating. It prevents us from enjoying the day and the goodness of God. Paul tells us within the mind is so important. So he's telling us what to do. Whatsoever things are true. The first thing that Paul said, when he said think on these things, the latter clause there, what can we determine from that? we can be master of our thought life. We can determine what goes into our mind. We can determine what stays within our mind. We can determine what we absorb within our minds. Take control of your thought life. Do not surrender your thoughts to the enemy. Do not surrender your thought life to the devil. Do not allow the media to capture your mind and determine what you think about. Paul says, think positively. Sometimes, as I've said, if we could only stop back and look back on what God has done and is doing for us. There's so many things that we can be grateful for and thankful God. Whatever things are true, think about truth. Practice truth, not lying. In every situation, we need to be saying within our mind, what is the truth in this situation? How can I present myself truthfully? Think truth, Paul is saying. Whatever things that's true, think about that. Whatever things are honest, be honest in your daily transactions. Be honest in your judgment. Be honest, my friend, in the issues that you have to deal with. Paul said, think truth, think honest, think justice. These are positive things that Paul is saying. Give justice at all times. Ask yourself, what is the just thing to do? What is the right judgment in this situation? Whatever things are pure, keep your mind clean. Don't dwell on the negative, dirty things. Dismiss everything from your mind that are impure and unclean. Dismiss all the negativities from your mind. Don't live a life of negativity, where all we can think is negative, negative, negative. You talk to some people and all they can see is the negative. Negative, negative, negative. Change that. Paul is saying change that around. Be positive. Think positive. Live positive. Meditate on pleasant things, not on negative things. Let your mind dwell on the thing that will make you smile. Let your mind dwell on the things that will make you happy. Think about good things that you have in front of you. Think back on the positive things, my friend. Dwell on these things. And that will lift your spirit. That will encourage you, my friend. Be positive in what we do. Control your mind. Don't allow your mind to be swayed by everything that you hear. Don't absorb the things that's going to damage you spiritually, physically, mentally, and socially, my friend. Paul said, if there's been any virtue, think on these things. So in closing, what did we learn this morning? That our mind is very important. The people are fighting for your mind. The enemy is fighting to control your mind. But you can take back control. Take back control of your mind, because your mind is important. Do not worry. Don't stress yourself out over things that you cannot change. Let the peace of God dwell within your heart, and be positive in your action, in your outlook, in your perception. And God will give you a good and prosperous life. May God bless you.